Hello and welcome back or welcome for the first time to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. This is Geek Out 98 over Axiom, which is book 5 in the Artorian archives, in the also based in the Divine Dungeon world by Dennis Vanderkerken and Dakota Krout. Welcome. So this book for me was a little weird. A lot of stuff that I thoroughly enjoyed, but some of it that I felt was different because the separation of authors. But there's a lot of it's a new territory because it is soul space, and there's a lot of opportunity to clear up or bring the two together in the next couple books before we get current or active with Completionist Chronicles.
Yeah. It's completely new space for us, right? We started originally on the Divine Dungeon, worked our way through those first 5 books, one of like our very first lit RPGs. And the Divine Dungeon is I don't know, it reads more as kind of like a fantasy, right? With cultivation components, not really the hard stats of LITRPG. But anyway, you go through all those 5, went through the Completionist Chronicles, which I believe we're at 6. And now with Artorian Archives, at the very end of 5 of the Divine Dungeon, we go into the Soul Space, right? And that's when it ends. Dale, Artorian, the whole original cast escape the moon, right? Coming down, Rings of Chaos, everything right there. And then I was thinking back about our previous Geek Outs. We did a lot of speculation in the Completionist Chronicles because we understood that the worlds were connected. And you start to see the distinction between the system and the administrator, right? And in book 5, we finally get the backstory to like what happens going into the soul space, transitioning into the Completionist Chronicles.
Or I feel like we get a glimpse into it. It makes a lot of sense that there's absolute chaos. And then, real quick, Dennis Vanderkerken himself, welcome, said, Carl, you are invisible. Yeah, camera stuff.
I'm practicing my light cultivation skills, just turning into pixie dust and sunshine and love.
But so the very end, when he talks about Dungeon Eternium and how he's essentially all of Cal's Soul Space is the testing grounds for figuring out the new system and implementing it, and then to store a copy of it inside Dungeon Eterniums, which that's the game that we start off with in Completionist Chronicles. So we know that this is essentially alpha testing, which makes a lot of sense for select things.
Yeah, and just the amount of time that gets covered alone in this book subjectively, right? We learn a lot of the backstory to Cal and how he's kind of like dealing with time, where mages had their own time sense depending on the level of law they accepted. Like this book just did a really great job with us having the administrator and the system kind of like talking it out, right? And getting a lot more of the world building and the magic behind it, which was so much fun. But then,
Well, plus it wasn't without repercussions because Kale is tapping into the law of time, accelerating it faster than other mages could even perceive it. Because A, he's such a higher rank, and then B, also tapping into the sense of time to give them more. Yeah, which then we run into the problems of when people do sleep, that's how all the broken items are coming to be from
right.
Kale, and that's when both Artorian and Dawn end up spawning their dreamer thingies,
Oh,
which
I
is
enjoyed that so much.
I feel like it probably was always a part of the Divine Dungeon world, but it couldn't have been really like acted upon because it's like so the connection bit where you become, I think it's when you first become a mage, it's just a strand, but then when you become an A mage, A rank mage, you turns into like a braided cord kind of deal, and there are multiple connections. So at the beginning, you have to create something inside your soul space, but then you actually have to become the embodiment of it, which, as we know that
Right.
it scales up.
They become the laws in a way, right? The further they progress up.
Yeah, because S is embodiment of it, and then once they hit holy, we don't know, but we do know that that's where the Tower of Ascension nodes hide. The heavenly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I got through it about 3 times before our Geek Out. How many passes did you get?
They were fairly disjointed. I think it was close to 3 as well, though.
There's just we're all over the place, right? Because you're bouncing between the different worlds and seeing the progressions there. Cal following the councils, seeing kind of like the game explained through Cal's perspective. Cause I trying to remember, he was pretty much talking to Artorian about how he's well over 100 years, but because of the time dilation, he said you can add a 0 or 2. He's not really keeping track. So then that's 1,000, 10,000 years old and just getting bored.
Yeah.
Letting the systems run and run and run, just so he can watch and see what works as he builds his game system, make his snarky comments. Thinking back through, like, even the beginning of books 1 and 2 of the Ritualist, right? Where Joe's complaining about the super snarky in the Completionist. He
Yeah.
complains
Sorry, you
about the
said I do the
system.
same thing where I use the first book as a series name.
Sorry. Yeah. So it's kind of fun because more things are clicking into place for me as I think about the Completionist Chronicles, right? Truly the
Yeah,
distinction
my
between this
one,
is
I guess, discrepancy that I had is Divine Dungeon 5 when Dale is going through the dungeon and trying to get stuff from Cal, such as, tokens to get stuff in the soul space.
mm-hmm,
And he's about to go up against Manny, and Cal gives Dale the memory core of a spell, and it essentially takes their body and their mana channels and their affinities that they have, and we know there are slightly open perfect channels, blah blah blah. Dale has all of them perfect,
mm-hmm.
and he creates them in a technique. And I going from that to where we're at now, like, it makes some sense in the fact that there's just a lot going on, and he's more or less taking the approach of, I guess I would say, coding, where everything is
There's a
number
lot of
based and
programming language
pylons
in there.
and
Yeah.
everything going on, as well as when Completionist Chronicles actually launches, Cal gets the massive knowledge influx of, being connected to the computer, to kind of dial in and figure things out. But the fact that he had all of the memories and can literally create the mana bodies however he wanted, I would have figured it would have implemented more like that versus the pylons. But
This is still the
that is
early
alpha
stages,
testing.
though. Yeah, I was about to
Yeah,
say,
and I
while
just
Artorian's out after Cal goes into his soul space, I think Don said it's like over 100. I want to say like 130 plus iterations of where everybody's put to sleep, right? They pretty
yeah.
much have only people who have sworn oaths to him originally as they try to figure it out. And each one of them kind of becomes a caretaker of a world. Um, yeah. And then between that point and the beginning of the Completionists, I want to go back and reread. I think it's the second one where Queen Marie kind of explains what happens, where she tells Joe and the gang about how the beginning was, and then they all got put to sleep.
We get a couple iterations of it. I know which one you're talking about. So in Ritualist, the very first book, he comes in and the lady's introducing herself to Joe, and she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, welcome to the newly something kingdom of a place and time." I know, horrible with
Yeah,
names.
yeah.
And then she's like, "Oh, well, I don't know why we call it new. It's been around for 200 years." whatever. But then we get talking to Queen Marie, and she essentially expresses that there was a higher being, which we know is Cal, or the Searchers. I can't remember the spicy
Yeah.
title of Completionist
Yeah.
Chronicles. And this all-powerful being has put us into stasis and just brought us back 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But we have
And let
to,
the games begin.
yep, defeat or shatter the Wolfman race.
And you get to see the tension start as soon as we get into the soul space, right? Like King Henry being just so oblivious to his Adrian, our our boy Tom's brother, the Wolfman.
Or I didn't feel like that was right at the beginning, but
Well, it's part of the book. I mean, in the beginning,
yeah,
as far as like going into the soul
yeah,
space,
okay.
and then over the several hundred years of subjective time to where we get into the completionist series. Because if
Though
you
I,
look just back at the Divine Dungeon, they were pretty like solid bros going into the soul space, right? When the
yeah.
second moon fell from the sky. And then, yeah.
Well, there are a lot of factors there with Cal's ley lines destroying um Odin's city of lightning, making
Mm-hmm.
him want to seek retribution, and then the Tom's brother, Aiden's friend, killing
Mm-hmm.
Amazonians to sacrifice them to, Divine Dungeon or Cal. Um, and then Cal going and like, hey, make a contract, absorbs all his memories, and turns him into what, allowing the world to see him as he is. Um, a couple of things with that whole like little planet side stuff there that I thoroughly enjoyed. Uh, I feel like Madame Chandra kind of took a weird turn that I didn't really expect, but it makes sense the fact that she went from a plant magus to a nature magus, as well as in the Completionist Chronicles, there's that little snippet when we're going through with our party and we get the greenhouse, and essentially this area is way over leveled and the forest keeps growing and growing, and we're initially only told about two factions because we're told
Mm-hmm.
about the Wolfman and the Human, but I
Mm-hmm.
thought Chandra was actually a Amazonian because we get the whole conflict with, oh, have you taught any, men to cultivate, which is the master, or whatever. And
There's
so
backstory there too, and I think there's
that
a
was pretty
novella I
snazzy.
want to get, but we get to see the relationship, right? The master and Madame Chandra, but they're not the master anymore, Uncle Tatum. Um, but before we go down that rabbit hole, it was really interesting seeing the differences between the caretakers like Madame Chandra, where most of the ones that stayed in more of their humanoid form, their bonded ones um, kind of like became more
Yeah, try
human-ish,
to
right?
emulate it,
Right.
emulate them.
And
Yeah, that was. And then you have the Brianna, the Dark Elf Queen, who essentially took all of her elite mage and made them her.
yes,
Oh, I forgot what they're
yes,
called. Bonded?
she's going to
Keep
be
wanting to
like the
say.
enforcers for the system, right?
Yeah.
Like when we need to call in the cavalry and the completionists, here they come, right? Because she ends up taking over, not really being the caretaker of, but just kind of like babysitting two other realms, right? Chosen. Thank you, Dennis.
Aha.
Um, so yeah, it's really interesting. And with Madame Chandra, her chosen, she wants to become more like her chosen, just so they're more comfortable. And
Oh,
so you can understand how, like, hundreds of years later, their perspectives shift, and the way they view the game system shifts.
plus, I thoroughly enjoyed that explanation and how she is in tight with the Wolfmen because they're not just clearing her forest,
They're
which
respectful of it.
initially led me to the question why we took when he has the massive stream of bear puns from the Completionist Chronicle, or the Spriggan, when we pick up the
Yes,
Spriggan, but
yes.
we also get from, not the master, but the master, Uncle Tatum, when he talks
Mm-hmm.
about Chandra, why we don't get Chandra because she's on the Wolfman side, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which, yeah, just adds layers. So for Easter eggs, there was a lot, but that's why we love the series as a whole, and just
The further I get into it, the more I want to go back and reread it just to see the connections and be like, oh, I see. Like, here are the puppet masters behind the scenes pulling the strings. Understand a little bit more about why Uncle Tatum stepped in to help Henry, and how Cal probably, um, you know, gave him a beating and put him in the timeout chair. And that's why Joe has to grind all
or
the.
I felt like Akko, or it's not really been fully expressed in this book, and I figure we'll see more of it in the
Mhm.
future ones. But how they briefly talked, they essentially made them gods when they went
He
and had the
straight up
conversation
says it
about the
with Tom.
numbers. Yeah,
Yeah, he's like, Tom's definitely getting a god spot in my game.
yeah.
And, just thinking back to the Divine Dungeon and watching the character progression for all these guys. And we haven't even
Well,
talked about Artorian's journey up his ranks. Like, he's finally at the part that we get to see in the Divine Dungeon with Cal, where it's more than just accumulating power, right? You have to embody your law to
yeah.
continue to progress up the cultivation chain. And his is love, right?
Which there are so many unique, twisty factors with that, and how
But you
he
get to see
actually,
him in the story kind of like work through it and learn, these different elements, these different laws for love. Where, I mean, just look at Dawn, right? Where they're at this point where they're trying to figure out their relationship. Everybody else is kind of like nudging each other's, like, yeah, lovers quarrel. Here they are duking it out as she's training Sonny how to fight and be a true mage, because he's pretty much just like an academic, right? 50-year-old man
or
who learned how to cultivate. He's only been doing it 30 years compared
my So he did really well with the main character dies stories over.
a couple
And
times. A flying
I
noodle, a dragon,
it
right? We
well,
got our
okay,
puns.
yeah, I guess we did die a couple times,
He got
but
put in quote unquote death timeout. He Artorian was the one that helped test it.
yeah, yep. And yeah, so that being a factor, and then another time he dies when he creates a sun and he changes the acceptance law, and that,
Come on, that was totally an act of love right there.
well, it
He
was an
knew
act of
Cal was
love
struggling
to
with
take.
everybody being mad at him.
Or, well,
So,
okay, I guess I was going a different direction, but yeah, to help out Cal and with
mhm.
everything, I was thinking more of if the nodes in the tower are the heavenly, which are the embodiment of the law, which used to be S rankers, which were the physical manifestations. I Yeah, that's a big thing just to
It
take. But then you have the opposite or the side tangent of it, where when we first meet Neverdash,
mhm.
the gnome, he says he's like ranked in memory, but everybody or the heavenly node is seen as something else. So having multiple iterations or multiple potential things that you can make from it, which is interesting.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much more there. The world building, seeing how, our gnome buddy started a new gnomish race and the magic of his realm. Um, that's part of the system helping power the Completionist Chronicles, right? We're pretty much
Or,
seeing
yeah,
all
I
the
think either the narrator just pronounced it differently, or it's like the first of multiple iterations for the
right,
Bifrost, because they call
right,
it, it's not called Bifrost, it's like Bifrost in this one, but yet again, alpha, so developments.
and or
Um,
audiobooks. Um,
yeah, different narrators.
so back on the Dawn bit though, like Artorian embodying love all throughout this book, where with Dawn, like he's pretty much, they have the conversation like best friends, not best friends. She has a kid, he helps like devote his love mana to her chosen, not chosen slash child. And Ember Dawn, whatever her name is, was the one that like ended his second life, his third life when he was a soldier.
I was about to
Like
say
he
the
had
full
straight up
180.
PTSD around her and just the journey with that. And then his very first chosen, making the next step over the spider, which was the teleportation dungeon, and seeing like that whole subplot string there with when he meets the dwarf that is Tex or whatnot, right? And yeah, people
Yeah,
being
what essentially
reborn.
died and was reborn and lost all
Hmm.
his memories. But I feel like that direction is what we're going to see a lot more of, mainly because of his, dreamer creation that the Chosen lost track of, where it's the purple
The
otter, the pink
pink
eyes.
eyes, yeah.
That is so.
It's forcing him to work through a lot of his trauma too, and that's what Artorian is, like a guy who keeps rooting for love, reborn, falls in love with the woman who eliminated his whole life, like terrified of spiders, you know, bonding with his first chosen, and then turning around, and when she comes to realize who he is, like straight up being like, whatever you want, if you want to walk away, like I never meant to hurt you, I never meant to make you cry.
Well, same
um
thing with like his third Chosen and just the weird aspect that happens
yes,
there, how she's in the icy landscape and she's more or less holding a, deceased child, and just the vibes we get there. And then, I'm giving you the opportunity to collect stories and to find meaning and to do what you will with it.
and he constantly goes the humble route with those moments because we get to see other mages on that level. And I think like even one of the early iterations of Cal Soul Space, they just let them all loose and they just went on a rampage, right? They're used to being, demigods. And instead of reacting, instead of like, you know, um, being like some of the other airheads, he's like, hey, this is how
All
I'm
right,
viewed.
here's
Like,
my
I need to
pen
do
and
better.
paper. Let me.
Yep. Let me take some notes.
Okay,
Let
yeah,
me
sure, we'll
let me
do it your
listen.
way. And then the dwarf questions him, and he's like, I literally just turned the highest ranking mage in here into a door.
Oh, I was chuckling so hard when
Or you
Artorian
had
was
me at
chuckling.
door.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Like, yeah.
yeah,
Um,
that was a good one.
you laugh, you cry. Artorian is just an awesome guy. Um, Definitely need to channel some of that energy sometimes. Really would be fun to think about Yeah, I would totally do an RPG in the Divine Dungeon. Is that a thing yet? Do a
Hmm.
tabletop?
I know Dakota has a lot going on since he's picked up the whole, you know, all the books he's writing, as well as Mountaindale Press as a whole, and just everything else. So,
Yeah, yeah. I would
but
love
he
to
does
do.
have pretty solid foundation of people that I'm sure he could pick up
Hmm.
more. But I don't really feel like I think it'd be cool, but it doesn't really fit the mystique, because
Mm,
a lot of his things like Divine Dungeon was really good, but left a lot of openings. That way you could have a complete full backstory of Artorian, or we're going to figure out the lion's lineage with the hunt, or, several of his other iterations.
yeah. For me, the way the Divine Dungeon series is kind of becoming, I was a huge Dragonlance fan growing up, and it's
Or
nice
did you
to have.
already grab that one?
Yeah, sorry, didn't read it off. No official RPG yet. Many work. One day though, I would love to play in that space. Think about what cultivation essence you'd use, what laws you'd bind to. Um, But yeah, with Dragonlance, that series, they get pretty in depth and you even get to like the second generation and just learn more about the world. That adds so many more cool elements to the earlier stories, right? Because it's really hard not to information dump. But the more time you play in the universe and the space, you start understanding like all the different dynamics and the backstory. And for me, like this book was felt very much in that vein of like, all right, cool. Like we get to see the gods of this world start tinkering in the early days of building everything. Yes, Dragonlance, awesome series. Um, yeah, it but yeah, so many fun sub threads.
Another thing that it's probably going to be covered in other books, but end of Divine Dungeon or Divine Dungeon 5, he gets all of those patterns from the people or Tom's homeland from the infernal dungeon underneath, but we don't really get to see a whole lot of those iterations.
Hmm.
It's kind of like passed off to Bob, who is broken.
We we get some, and we know that it's there and can come back to later, right? Cover those
Yeah,
other elements of the book. Even just like, gosh, like so
but
many
I
other
give him the pass
characters.
because it's the difference between everything that we've known being a dungeon, expanding your influence, working with inside of your influence, creating stuff
Hmm.
versus soul space.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, how'd you feel about combat in this book? We get a
I
handful of fight scenes, but it's not.
the combat was so I enjoyed the combat and the sense of progression. For this one, it wasn't as, I guess, stair steppy, where it wasn't as linear, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Artorian, when he's smacking around Cal, he just flexes and goes over all of these things, and we have the deep, differing love things. So
Mhm.
he just, goes Super Saiyan, and then for the combat, the biggest one was right before he gets his first chosen, and he's just naming off a bunch of random stuff, triggering the pylons, which was interesting and unique for seeing the spells and their iterations. Um, but wasn't like, I don't know. it was satisfying with the whole interplay of the different effects going off at the end there, where it's, oh, I forget what it was. It was like cavitation and something else, and they're like, we're basically the same thing, and going off, and how one is expanding and one is compressing, and then the fire is just like, yeah, I'm gonna jump in here too. And so I enjoyed the dynamics behind it, but it wasn't at quite as satisfying for the combat potential.
You just want always more combat. I
This is true. I felt
we got to see
it took
how
me
the
a
magic
lot.
worked though going into it, right? And that's part for me that where in a way I feel like some of the combat scenes in this book were on a next level because you have like flying through space as they're testing stuff and
I did
Cal's like, hey,
enjoy
let me put a
Ember.
fire hose to your spine and pump you up with power so you could just
Yeah, Dawn's
this goes
and
to the testing budget when it comes to mana.
yeah,
Just
Dawn's and Arturians was probably the best combat.
mhm. And then, like you were talking earlier with the combat, and then also the magic piece, Artorians, we get to see all the testing phases, right? Like he gets
Hmm.
runes carved into his arms, and we get to see like
Or
the
I thought it was just
power
his fingers,
could be.
because it
Um,
was the whole idea of connecting them to complete the circuit.
mm, see, another reason to go back and reread it. There's just so much epic goodness in there. Yeah. Thanks, Dennis. This goes to the testing budget. I laughed. That's a good one. Cal makes those exceptions for his administrator sometimes. Um, yeah. I wish we got to see more of Bob thinking about the
I
accounting errors later because he was such
So
a
that
big
was a
character.
very so a couple side tangents. I thought Bob would have been a bigger role, which he was a big role,
He was a
but the
huge
fact
role.
of his soul essentially breaking because
He's Cal's
he
guppy.
separated out into multiple different bodies, which he's probably
Mm-hmm.
the only one that he could have uniquely done that, because that's what he was doing with the memory crystals and the alpha memory crystals, and
Mm-hmm.
how he created the goblin berserkers, so on and so forth. And uh, I'm confused as to how he was still functioning if he was, you know, broken.
Fan theory question. Because I know how much you enjoy doing some theory crafting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bob is bonded to the law of death, right? He's a death mage,
Hmm.
and he pretty much died in his seed core, and he's still alive, but he's pretty much like a mage in name only because of the disconnect. So
Mm,
I'm just saying there could be some potential there for like some super later comeback, but it still hurt because Bob, um, yeah, came up through the tunnel drinking the runoffs of water with all the different essence, and yeah, yeah. Thank you,
yeah, Bob
Bob,
is
the
the
death
death
law.
law, and then seed core death equals final death. So,
So sad.
or wait, so I guess I wanted to re-listen to that portion when Arturian finally gets to
The
the
moon.
the moon, and how Miss, I'm not a prostitute. I can't think of her actual name.
All
Minya.
worship the
Uh,
cult of Cal.
yeah,
I
yeah.
loved how everybody cringed when she was about to go on like some sermon and everything. Yeah,
Minya isn't that his seed core that shattered?
Bob's final death.
Well, yeah, but then they're when we talk to Cal later, Kale pretty much says like when you met Bob at the first meeting, he was already like that.
Mm-hmm.
So was the final death, but wasn't the final death
Well, he's dead,
after.
but he still seems to be moving around or
And
whatnot.
I
Like
guess
they're still
he's also
alive. He just can't.
different because he is a
There was like thousands of
dungeon
them.
born, or he
Mm-hmm.
was a recreation initially, so it's not like Cal doesn't have the template, but then we get the variables of being in the soul space.
I was about to say, by the time we get into soul space, pretty much everyone, well, not everyone, later when he recreates them. But yeah, they're
And
they're
then
they're just hooked up to the network on our tree.
and then that's the other question, because when Arturian is having the heart-to-heart conversation with Kale and essentially is, like, oh, well, he hangs out with Grace, and Grace has other Wisp friends, so they've came through the Silverwood
Mm.
tree, and our seed cores, my understanding, are the Silverwood tree cores, which are essentially dungeons, and what we're putting all of our correct stuff into is Dungeon Eternium, who is our triple S rank dungeon core that we brought over through. So
So
is
much
it
there.
kind of a forwardly backward similar concept to when people die, they start off as a new one. Once they hit a certain threshold, they regain their memories. But all of these dungeon cores, their secondary half or their manifestation of energy wisps came through. But much like Dungeon Eternium is still asleep, is it something separate that Kale has to devote enough energy to get them back to their threshold so that then they can become awakened? Because I'm pretty sure I feel as if Completionist Chronicles Dungeon Eternium is still being ran by Kale, and the
There's so
administrator is
many
Arturian.
questions and pieces there. Yes, we do get to hear some of that early speculation in this book,
Yeah.
but um, Cal, for one, is just like super good at making and copying things, right? Like we see that in the Divine Dungeon,
Oh yeah,
just the
anything that
amount
dies
of,
in his influence, he knows how to
yeah,
create. He gets a
yeah.
drop
And
of blood, he can recreate it, he can splice creatures together, he can do
he's a
his etching solution
perfectionist
stuff
with
for his runes. Yeah.
Danny holding him to account to make sure he's going above board and, really embodying his law. And hey, Carlos, good to see you, buddy.
Hello.
Um, and yeah, the accumulation of mana and essence was a big piece for them in this book with Cal and everybody trying to figure out from day one. And then when we start talking about the game, and then you talked about the people, how they pretty much have their memory wiped and then they can like start learning from the get-go without all the grudges and whatnot. But with the game, at one point, I wish I pulled it. Cal talks about how like mana and everything will be for like the original people over here, and then for the people in the game, they'll have their own different essence type. And then just like so much of this book was trying to figure out, like you said, how to accumulate the mana. And we're
And
like
how to
Artorian
make
with the
everything work.
sun making a deal with one of the higher laws, and helping everybody with like the progression piece and whatnot. Yeah, so much fun. I wish there was more in each and every book because I could get lost in the world building. I know not everybody is like that, and there is such thing as too much, but the magic
Yeah,
system and
but
getting to see everything come together.
they do a good job balancing it because it wasn't all world building. It was, character development and,
Hmm.
becoming the beggar and the nicest people. you will meet you wouldn't have met if you just
Mm-hmm.
stopped assuming. And there's a lot of new stuff, a lot of old stuff. One thing I was also a little disappointed in is Barry the Devourer also has a direct contract with Cal because when the Master was dying and offered himself up, Barry also did. I know that's a can of worms and we really don't want to open that, but
Did he get decanted yet? I know we talked about him as an example of what we didn't want.
or, well, yeah, there was kind of the example or talk through of who gets to cultivate. But I don't think there's any mention of Barry. We ran into a couple guildies who, the
Right,
one we turned into a door. Um,
right.
yeah.
Such a fun scene.
And then I'm also, it makes sense, but I'm also a little like, we still don't know what, um, cultivation path the master is, and they
They're
keep it hidden
secretive
in this
about
one
it
as
because
well.
he's not a true
And
necromancer.
at the end of, so I think he may be higher than Kale, but not really, but is because we have that conversation of when the master is teaching him things and he's talking about the soul and he's figuring it out. And he literally says, well, souls are a higher cultivation than me.
They had to give up their higher rank bodies because Cal couldn't hold them, but they still were higher
But
on
S
the
ranks are the embodiment or they
right,
are the spiritual
right.
rank, and their souls and their minds are one,
Hmm.
but they're essentially just, downgraded into A rank bodies for the moment, which I feel he should be. He literally absorbs every bit of essence in the world, which is the second half of the cataclysm. The first half is the moon striking the earth, and then the second half is Cal stealing all of the essence. But Xenocide is still alive and kicking, and his whole plan was to ascend into the heavenly and go into Dungeon Eternium's core when the madness of the moon striking the earth happens, which is connected to a silverwood tree, and that's how Dungeon Eternium got into Cal's soul space. So we only have one silverwood tree because it was directly teleported and absorbed into Cal's soul space. Um, I wouldn't expect the silverwood tree to survive being struck by a moon, but madness and his
Magic.
energies, he's literally provocatively dancing on his rune script, charging it up in his you know, sexy anime poses, dodging attacks and whatnot. So there's,
That
yeah,
scene
questions.
from the previous book where Artorian is just like completely BSing with him. He's like, "Oh, you're right. I should end this." And it's like, "Oh, Artorian." Yeah.
And another thing, sorry, just continuing on rants that I thoroughly enjoyed is throughout the Divine Dungeon series, they always say celestial feces. Well, we do know that Cal's backup plan for his portal is literally in a pile of poop. And it has also added extra runes and essence and blah to make it smell and to deter things, which, how fossil fuel works. It's the compression of natural decomposing plant stuff. So it makes sense for the Completionist Chronicles start for all of that to become fuel. Um, and it's
We
just,
now
yeah.
start swearing to Cal in or Kale in this book.
Yeah, we do, but it's just the full circle joy of it all. Of it started off as their curse word of celestial feces, and then he becomes the divine dungeon and divine divinity, and literally being in feces.
So I appreciated the fact that, like, I believe it's in book 5 of the Divine Dungeon, we finally find out why the Divine Dungeon is the series. And the whole Divine Dungeon series was really good about like plugging the name as a joke, right?
Or yeah, the titles were very like, this is what is going to happen in the book.
Right, right. Um, book 5 of the Artorian Archives, and Artorian gets introduced to it by Kale. So, uh,
Or Axiom for his law.
no, Artorian Archives, the series name.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. It was after the moment where uh, Cal changed him into the younger version of himself. And Dawn was pretty adamant that she check first. And just Artorian, if you think back to it, I want to say it's like the first book when he's in the Fringe, he kind of like goes through this process where he's like, okay, this,
Oh yeah,
the
being around
elder,
the fire and all his different
yeah,
iterations
yeah,
that he's had to surpass.
mm-hmm, kind of
And
like reborn as
that
Artorian.
eh, so that creates a lot of problems or questions. In this book, his bonfire is the Silverwood tree that he has a connection to, which we still do not know a whole lot about because through the Divine Dungeon series, we get a snippet at the end, other than needing dense magic to thrive, and its pollen is what allows the elves to reproduce, which is a question within
Which our
itself
moon elves
because
now
they are
have.
only elves because of them being a mage or an S ranker who can modify their body image, which is why Chandra becomes a tree person and how Barry hides his ears and blah blah blah. Um, yeah, and
Mm.
then not until close to the end of the Divine Dungeon series when we meet Dungeon Eternium and he explains, oh, you can connect to it. You gotta, it's a give and a take. You gotta give mana and pull mana. And then that's also how he gets all of his seed cores because they are dungeons that are connected to his ley lines. Um, yeah. And
Setting up
then
a network, get the
in
power.
Arturian, his center space is no longer the fire pit. It's the seed core in the celestial tree or
Right, when he
silverwood tree.
ascended.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, but when he got brought back, he wanted to go to the older grandpa self because that wasn't the version of him anymore, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and I think that's probably even more so important in the soul space because, like, they talk about early on, you're more than just your memories, right? There's also that connection to your soul, which is very much your identity, your embodiment of your law. So yeah, a lot of fun things, things that make you go, channel the law of love, good old Sunny.
Yep.
The Yeah, there's just so much fun angles and potential in this book, like the evolution of the chosen, because at the very beginning, um, they can't even talk to their dreamers, their gods, their deities. And then towards the end of them, they're managing a lot of Artorian's responsibilities for him,
Yeah.
right? And just think
Well,
about the fact
that
that, like, as the administrator, to have this hive of spiders that can go out and be your eyes, like when he's the dragon noodle with antlers.
So that was I would consider an addition inside of this book that was very unique in yeah. Yeah, that was something that wasn't a part of any of the others, and yeah, was just though sidestep the King Crab, which was the world boss for Artorian section, um, and then Dawn has hers. And I'm curious if Endgame that we meet in Completionist Chronicles is the one that formed on King Henry, Marie, uh, I'm a Wolfman, and Chandra.
Adrian.
If that was Endgame, was their world boss.
Mm.
You know,
Well, yeah, there's just so
because
many
they can't
threads
work
there.
together to take it on.
Mm-hmm. Part of that is Cal just having creations that he needs to let loose, and there's been a couple times, even in this book, where he's like, "Oh, yeah, launch this. Uh, we're now just going to call this a feature. Didn't mean to do that, but it's a feature now. If you can go and take care
I
of that,
figured
good
that
luck."
was
Him just meddling, getting
no,
bored.
you remember the Distortion Cat
Mm-hmm.
book one, main character dies, story's over. That was him wanting to make big runes and to do stuff, and you don't know the end result until you try it. And he was, had ideas or plans for decanting people and the process and how it's all going to work out. Yeah, accidentally connected it.
Oops.
That was the vibe I got there.
Yeah.
Though I thoroughly enjoyed the added elements of rolling the dice and when we get the glaciers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing more of the world development in the next couple books. I believe we have 8 out now. 9 is around the corner.
And 12 is in the works.
Yeah, yeah. So much fun. So much more to discover. And then, yeah, I need to go back and reread the Completionist Chronicles probably after the next book when we get to see a little bit more progression towards the game mode.
Yes.
Yes.
Or so the Completionist Chronicles sticks with the Divine Dungeon kind of theme where they're shorter, they're very quick on the progression, and just a lot happens as well as potential jumps in between them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. And I think he mentioned that he enjoyed his Rexus side quest one, but he's probably not going to do more of them until all of it's complete, which is fine. But
There's
I
so
would
much
like to
content
see more,
already.
yeah,
Yeah.
fleshed out, and he could very easily pick up other authors to help him flesh
Well,
out additional side world or intricacies.
initially when it came out, and I was keeping up with the releases of the Completionist Chronicles, I was one of those fans where I'm like, it was fun, but I wish we had more of the main series, the main story. But as it progressed, the Completionist Chronicles, like you just get so much out of hanging out with Jackson and Rexus. Um, all right, we got some clarification again. Thank you, Dennis. I am currently writing book 12. Correct. 5 and 6 are some world building. Thank you. 7, 8, 9 are Completionist Chronicles Alpha Run. 3 whole books of the Alpha Run. 10, 11, 12 is more plot goodness. And then 13, 14, 15 is Completionist Chronicles Beta Run.
Hmm. which I think that's
That
when completion. That's
is,
when we get introduced for Completionist Chronicles. Uh, well,
I'm
okay, so if you're
excited.
talking like Wolfman, I think that's technically beta with Sam. But if you're talking, I guess Joe
Yes.
is could have been beta, but took a while for the money to come through, so he was like a month
No.
behind.
Yeah, yeah. Subjectively. That's 10 books before the start of the Completionist
Oh,
Chronicles.
whoops. There we go.
Dennis Vanderkerken again. We might jump from the end of beta run straight into CC1.
Okay, so
Artorian Archive 16 and Completionist Chronicle 1 are likely the timeline merger. That
okay, so yeah,
is so
there's a
10
lot more
books at least
development.
of
Well,
be-
and that's the
Soul
beauty of
Space
it,
2.
because the way
You're
the
talking at
Divine Dungeon
hundreds of
leads
years.
off is we just talked to Acme, the law, and we realize that the world's going to die, and the only one who survives is the humans. And essentially, what happens is the moon comes down, ice age, as well as Cal absorbing all of the essence, which makes it no longer able to have essence. And then I forget the numbers, but yeah, there's a lot of time in between the end of Divine Dungeon and beginning of Completionist Chronicles that Arturian Archive can play with.
I mean, yeah, just the recovery of a moon hitting the earth. And then inside the soul space subjectively. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm just curious where the dinosaurs came from. Were those all S rankers who had
Uh,
changed their forms?
uh, hmm, hmm. I'm curious. Like
Because
there was
also
a
they can do
lot.
that whole transition into different space and times where, for example, how Dawn hides from the dwarves, or
Mm,
how
yeah, I think she says something along the lines of like they're monsters or mana just pretending to be human or whatever.
yeah.
Um, you be whatever you want to be, do what you want to do. Um, I still wondering if like the wood elves who didn't make it, we learned that only a couple of them came into Cal's soul space, or at least sent some of their offspring in there. Like we're just talking about this gets us up to the Completionist Chronicles, right? We haven't even gone down
Or
the
this
rabbit
gets us
hole.
to the end of Divine Dungeon.
Right, but according to Dennis
Or yeah,
Vanderkerken,
through yeah.
16 books of this is where we meet up with the Completionist Chronicles timeline. And then just like everything going on there at the end of all that, like are any of our wood elves or other allies still around on the outside? Like what survives a
I
moon when it comes to magic? Like we have that stargazer who was out.
but Sky Spear is a moon. Sky Spear was sent down to capture Blighty, which was a elemental. The only thing I think that would be problematic is similar to when we get into the soul space, we have everybody's on a death timer due to essence deprivation, but all of the ones that would have survived, being the S ranks, are literally the embodiment and have great control over their essence. So they probably just bleeped into another span or time or space of existence because I'm pretty sure
what
Woa
what is
didn't
time and
die.
space,
And
and
then, yeah,
who's the embodiment of the law, and can we trade them some mana to do what we want to do anyway? You want a sun template? Here you go. Here's the template of the sun.
yep.
You want
So
it,
I'm pretty sure there are others that it survived, as well as like the dwarves, there's several dwarves that are pretty much like, hey, we're gonna bunker down, we're gonna hide.
Mm-hmm.
And you get, Dale saying they're not gonna survive, or just gonna let them go do that. And then the master being like, well, it's not my place.
Yeah.
Their way may work.
I enjoyed when Artorian was going around through the different realms, seeing the different creatures living there, and then just like thinking about, hey, we're in the early stage in the Completionist Chronicles. We're only on like the second landmass, right?
Yes. And that's where everything I had speculatively was a lie, because there's been a lot more developments. So, everything we know in Arturian Archives 5 doesn't matter, because there's what did we say, 10 more books
10
until we
more
actually
awesome
get to
goodness.
CC1, which at the end of 5 is understood to be Dungeon Eternium's seed core, which is going to house Dungeon Eternium. So
The game.
everything we know is still just what we can easily implement patches,
Well,
I guess
it's
is what I'm
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
say,
yeah.
as well as I was curious where Danny and the Silverwood Tree were throughout the Completionist Chronicles series. Answer is not in the Completionist Chronicles series. They're in the extra layer. And so all of this makes me think
Well,
of Men
this is
in
just early
Black.
speculation. Like a lot could change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or in Men in Black, where we get the kitty who has the collar, which has the marble or whatever, which is actually like a whole world contained inside of it.
Hmm.
That's what Completionist Chronicles is.
Yeah. So do we have time for just like completely off the wall speculation, or should we wrap it up?
Speculation is fine.
All right. I always get it mixed up, but something full murder hobo.
Hmm.
Spoiler warning ahead. You've been warned. Typically the way we do it is like if we've covered it in a geek out, it's fair game, but try not to go further past that. But in full or in something full murder hobo, we learn about the system and the game and how like the worlds are ending, right? And he talks about it in this book, how he has to watch these worlds like go through their cycle to see what works. So the best thing for him to do is have a hands-off approach and let it, grow, die, rebuild, grow, die, rebuild. Um, yeah.
So my only causal connection, which is not really, but the one Easter egg that was my favorite from Something Full Murder Hobo is when they're talking about stats and progression, and it's the Archmage talking to his trainee, and he's like, don't be a reductionist. Well, in Completionist Chronicles, our main boy Joe is a reductionist. So random
There's a
speculation,
lot of like, I
something
see what
full
you did
murder
there.
hobo, which
Yeah.
is, hey, Dungeon Eternium holds a whole world, but we're a bunch of little worlds, is
Like, is
after
that your Men in
or
Black moment
after
where
more progression in Completionist Chronicles Dungeon Eternium. We Bivrost or whatever, however, through to other worlds, which comes into
Mhm.
something full murder hobo because they have knowledge of reductionists. And by that point, I assume Joe has made more of a name for himself and or become the soul
his
incarnate
dark
of what's up?
his dark cult, who his deity is Uncle Tatum, the master, who's currently in book 5 hanging out in hell, and all his epic powers that his body burns out every couple days. And like, it's just funny how Joe's progression, the darkness, he just kind of becomes more of like Yeah.
Oh,
Big.
I guess that's true, Dennis. I forgot about that. Oh, you do it. So, real quick before this, Dakota Krout actually mentions that Full Murder Hobo is a separate entity, just in case, for rights purposes, he didn't want them to be connected.
Mm,
So, Full Murder Hobo is only
we
reference, homage, tribute to, and nods, not actually connected to Arturian Archive, Divine Dungeon, Completionist Chronicles, all due to legal copyright and IP. So, yeah. I
fanboys can dream though. I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah,
I could see
and
it with the potential in the same space. Uh, Go ahead.
yeah. It's okay. It's okay. I understand,
We appreciate the
Dakota. You only have so
clarification.
much time in the day. You have a lot of projects going on. Please create more goodness
Or
and
more epic collabs like with
feel
Dennis
free
Vanderkerken
to
in the
pull
Artorian
a
archives.
who am I thinking of? Lucas Arts or Lucas Studios, where he sold out to Disney. But I mean, hell, he created a great thing, and now someone else can build the legacy.
Have you seen Star Wars Visions yet? The
No,
anime style. Supposedly it's just recently dropped. I've seen the first couple. It's a lot of fun, but
okay.
I don't want to digress too much. Definitely check it out though. Disney Plus. Um, no affiliate links. Just go online, watch it. Anyway, yeah. Were there any like favorite scenes from book 5 that just really popped for you?
There were a couple. Main character dies, story's over. Bag inside a bag was comical goodness. You had me at door was a great moment as well.
Yeah.
Sunny getting some love and Dawn figuring out, that stuff was touching. Kale getting smacked around and the blowing up the sun, creating a sun node was phenomenal and amazing. Um, Throughout a lot of it, I felt like initially, Arturian didn't really get his sunshine and love philosophy, but then he
Hmm.
just kind of dumped a lot of it, a lot of it in several different iterations when he's consoling Kale and getting him to sleep and, to embody and become the most and the perfection of everything, as well as when he starts having his law smack him around and he starts,
I was about to ask that. Like,
going
what do you think
into
of?
the all the different iterations and versions of love, and then his law deciding to give him the pink-eyed entity to help him along his journey and to have him reflect instead of dodge and evade all of his love
Hey, hey,
angle law stuff. Yeah, good.
Ca-
It was good stuff.
Cal did start making mages victims to common ailments. Did you just say that Artorian had pink eye and I missed it?
Well, he is in Cal's soul space, which is in a bunch of poop, and yeah, so maybe. Uh, More Dennis Vanderkerken here. Bibliomancer is Coda's and James Hunter. Lineage is Coda and Rowan Rubilaker. Rub, how do you say that?
Your guess is as good as mine with last names.
The creation
Rohan
process is
Rubaker.
different, but they're in progression. I
We
have
get the audiobooks and we haven't listened to Rohan's yet, so we haven't heard it.
I've been through it once. Um, yeah, I'm reserving judgment. I probably wasn't in the correct mindset for it, which, influences how I feel. But yeah, didn't feel amazing, but reserving judgment. Yeah.
So this whole subplot was a lot of fun. Dennis Vanderkerken, how did y'all feel about the entire interaction with Zelia the spider. Thank you for the name plug. You know how bad we are with names. So Artorian's first chosen is when he gets like lost down underground, right, and fighting off the what we later learn is the the truce or the council of bugs. We all band together and fight off like this thing that she fears. Like she just knows him as the hand, right? And we get to see it from her very spidery perspective. And he shows up and makes her a chosen, right? And then later on, Artorian asks Cal, and we find out like, hey, yeah, like that was the dungeon in the fringe that he was like teleporting around, and we get to see it from like her perspective and just like the embodiment of love again all the way through, where he does what he can to get over his fear, dislike of spiders to be Grandpa Sunshine, Pills, and Love. Sorry, go ahead. I've been rambling.
No, there are so many, and I'm going to lose a part of these. A, Arturian does the love thing. Amazing. Very good. B, that core was able to take Arturian to the tower. C, I forgot about that being a dungeon core who is now in a body who is running amok throughout the world, which leaves to question if the Silverwood tree creates a seed core being connected through the ley lines, which absorbs the dungeons out in the real world and is inhabited by another soul. Are they ejected from their body, which then makes them into something like Zilia? I enjoyed the interaction. It definitely fits Sunny's theme, similar to Dawn and that whole example.
Just the relationship building for them too. Like she fears him and then she bonds with him, and then like they have that epiphany, and like again he chooses the route of like humility, and he's like, hey, like I didn't know this was the case. If you want to walk away, be your own person, like go ahead, it's your choice. And Zelia understood that like it was her choice. um and they
See ya,
bonded even
Carlos.
that much harder over it. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, Carlos. um so it was a lot of fun, and just the potential there, like her evolution into kind of like the matron of his chosen, where she has her spiderkin out and about taking care of things for her,
Well,
and kind of like managing his land and becoming the caretaker, right? Pretty much on a whim, he left her in charge before he took off. And then I think there's like a 10-year nap somewhere in there as well.
so another random thing, all of the chosen end up kind of altering their bodies to become more humanoid, which, as we know
With the
through the
human,
old, or yeah, other than Chandra's, in the old way of the world with the essence, it was only the S rankers that could tweak or change, or was it the mages that could do it as well?
mhm.
Anyway, you had to be so strong before you could change your body, elf ears, yada yada. Um, so are they mages? How does there's not like a direct transforming of powers? I don't know. The chosen so far are a very unique element that was just introduced in this one that I don't fully understand because it's kind of like
There,
a soul connection, but then
that's
they
what I mean.
have their life of previous existence, which
I
they
I
unlock
want
as they level
the
up.
RPG books where you could like open it up and just read like D&D style, all the epic goodness of how the magic and the mana and essence work
But
in Cal's soul space, because like they exist as seed cores, right? And so he creates their bodies for them, and they power it through their connection. And yeah, just so much goodness. Really appreciate you hanging out with us, Dennis. Question is, we do a prelim visit to the realms in AA5. How did y'all feel about them? Distinct enough, in particular, when we get to Nelfheim? How did y'all feel about Gomi, Brianna, and later Odin in Asgard? I'll jump in unless you're ready, Pete.
Or go ahead. I'll try to
Okay.
remember.
They felt very distinct. And I enjoyed those scenes a lot because we get to see Artorian connect with Brianna a few times. And I wish we got more screen time with her because you can kind of see her doing her empire building thing in the background with her 100 chosen and spies. The fight with Artorian and Gomi was just clutch. And one of the things I really appreciated about it is like we got to see Artorian's development, right? The fact that he's used to duking out with Dawn, so he's already like familiar with her. And then he gets that additional training to where not only does he get the skill set, but like just his confidence going toe to toe with Gomi, who punished Dale for so long. So that was fun, kind of like getting a bit of that closure there, as Grandpa Sunshine in Love looks out for his chosen disciple, not chosen, his anyway. Yeah, and then hanging out in each of the realms. I wish we could spend more time there, but I'm guessing we'll get to see more of that in the later books as they progress.
It kind of fits the theme for Arturian, where he made the Sky Spear what it was for the cultivation, and
Mm-hmm.
then left, and gosh, everybody trying to find him and shot into space and picking up the bards and running amok, as well as when he finally becomes part of the top person of the school. Can't think of words for Cal or Dale's school. He's all over the place, and then it just fits in with the theme of him being an administrator. But with the realms, like I thoroughly enjoyed it because you got to see each of them kind of planning and acting it out. Um,
He's such
yeah,
a
and
carefree
everybody
administrator.
taking their unique aspects like Brianna and making all of them her chosen, and they're just a monster, a powerhouse, a lot of potential there. And then you get, Chunra, oh,
Adrian,
ba, ba,
Henry,
ba.
and Marie.
Yeah, all of them. Maybe I missed it, but I felt like we met with Chandra. That was okay. We met with
Her visit was pretty quick. He just got a flower to put on his shoulder and then pop around with.
yeah, and then we met with the Wolfman, but I felt like when we did with Marie, we met her in the bathtub, we got put into the brig, and then I felt like it just ended after that, where I was a little confused. It just like kept
The
going.
the scenes with each of them were short, but they were nice little snapshots to kind of show the progression for each of the characters, right? Like Chandra into becoming more of a plant person, Adrian developing more feral like features, Henry. Well, the few times we get to see Henry, he's showing up, tripping over his feet in the high gravity realm.
Yeah,
But with Queen
when
Marie,
Dawn are
like,
going at it.
yeah, we get to see her in like all her war form where everybody freezes whenever she moves. Um, But again, with like Artorian's trip there, he gets a bit of humility along the way where he's like, "Oh, I'm the administrator. Who do you think you are?" He's like, "Wait, no, they're just doing their job." Okay. Thanking the guards along the way as he goes. And when he
Yeah,
gets
yeah, the
summons,
power
he
going to
just
his head kind of deal
phases
there.
through. And the same thing, like he has a couple of the other uh deities, if you will, kind of check him, where even Uncle Tatum is like, "Hey, haven't we all told you, like, give us a shout out before you just pop in? We might be in the bathtub. We could be ready to receive you. Instead, you show up and my gravity completely wrecks you, and this
Yeah,
all could have been prevented."
I've
And he
been
takes it.
disappointed with the Master because all through Divine Dungeon, he's this mysterious evil guy and he's, taken over the world several times. But then you get Chandra's view and she's like, well, he's not a necromancer. He never was. He was just always really good. But then we learn, oh, it's because Madness or Xenocide came by and gave him stuff. And that's how he knew the knowledge. Random
Hmm.
question. We still don't know what cultivation type or law he is a part of. And
Got
then,
to keep
like, when he
reading.
comes into the soul space, he just kind of gives up. And he's just like, I'm the janitor. I just clean up stuff. So I was,
I
and
don't. I
then,
don't think he gives up. I think there's a bit of like we get to see a bit of atonement from him, character development wise, towards like the end
well,
of Divine
yeah, I guess he,
Dungeon. And we get to see it through a couple different lenses where like the big boogeyman is always the big boogeyman depending on whose perspective it is. And then when you get more of the details, they're just people. Like I think he was just trying to fight for his men, right? Where the Amazonians were keeping them as slaves and subjugating them, et cetera, et cetera. And also like Artorian, kind of like when him and Dale first meet on the mountain and they talk about, well, why didn't the necromancers just kind of like chill out and do better? Um, so with Uncle
well,
Tatum,
that, and we also get, I guess, I'm pretty sure he is above
he was a
Cal.
higher, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he's part, like, Souls is kind of his thing because he realizes that Dale and Cal
Hmm.
share a soul.
Hmm. Yeah. He's one that I could read a series on, a spinoff.
I so I was wondering where the Amazonians were this whole time, and we finally got to see him with
With Odin.
Odin's thing. I
Go from hating men to worshiping one.
I was also a little confuddled, and or they may come later. When in Divine Dungeon, when Cal saps the lightning essence and Odin
Hmm.
becomes who he is due to his oath, and his two brothers get turned into a duck and something else. I would have expected Kale to be able to reform them in whatever kind of body anyway, and or for them to already be high enough mages to re-image or recreate their bodies. So I was a little disappointed. His brothers weren't there, but I was also
At
like,
least we didn't see
all
them.
right, because we have our
There,
harem.
uh,
So,
there's a lot there on Odin's continent that we don't get to see, except for the fact that Artorians chosen Zelia and the rest of them. Oh no, it's our I forget the chosen's name. Our ice friend.
yeah, our storyteller, Ice Lady.
She goes over there and kind of holds him to account.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll get more of that. More reasons to keep reading
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
enjoying the world
There's a
building.
lot more that they can develop, and of course, a lot of questions to be asked.
Hmm. Yeah.
And like we also don't talk about because we know Cal. So, for example, Cal is a whatever mage. Dale is a B rank mage. Kale is whatever he wants to be because magic.
Magic.
Also, when they talk about like the time stuff, either I was confused or it was supposed to be backwards because he's accelerated his time essentially to the max. And then when he's talking or when they're having the very first meeting and he drops plan two and he has to recreate plan three, and we get
Mm-hmm.
the whole, oh, well, I can't cheat with reference images. It acts as if he can speed up even further, but I think the verbiage they use is he can slow down at will, which slowing down would mean everybody else is going faster. And I just like, I don't know. How do you all feel about the dragon? I enjoyed it. It definitely gave me a Dragon Ball, the long that style of dragon I think of when I think of Dragon Ball Z. I enjoyed the development of the name being long, and then why don't you just name it that Dragon, as well
I
as
thought that was so clever because,
the
like, at
whole like
first I was like trying to figure it out in my head, like when they were explaining it, I'm like, what is this? Like piecing it together. And then when him and Bob make that joke, like a dragon, then it kind of like clicks in my head. And I'm like, oh, very, very punny. Um, sorry, you were saying, Pete?
as well as like oh, I forget what the landmass he's on. Why do you keep hitting me? And just so that was where it was beautifully done that they are being subjected to a time sense that they are not capable of going at by themselves inside their law, being the mage that they are. But with inside Kale, they are, yeah, they are going faster than they should be. So the only way to recuperate and not burn out is to go to sleep or to go back into your seed core and, you know, blah blah blah. Um, yeah, as well as that was another element that I was curious about because Danny throughout Divine Dungeon does go into mobs, and I guess Cal also goes into mobs and controls them throughout the fight. But now we know any of the gods, so to speak, could.
You mean these deities could like embody these, super soldiers with magic powers to rain death and destruction?
I keep getting like caught between a bunch of different books, but in
There's
my thought
just
process,
so much goodness. Uh, Dennis Vanderkerken,
time
appreciate the
things.
clarification as always. Time thing, correct. They got it backwards. It gets explained again in a later book.
Okay, yeah, because it says he slows down, but that would make everybody else faster. And yeah, it's
Dennis says the short of it is they get no dilation, no super speed. Napping is required. AA6 has some solutions for problems in AA5.
okay. And I mean, it makes
Nice.
sense because, pardon my language, example, everybody only has so many F's, beeps they can give. So if you exhaust them all at the beginning, by the end, you have no more. So you need it. And yeah, essentially, they are moving at a faster pace. So they need, recuperation time.
Yeah. And
But
that's
you
when
get
like,
the
oh, go
weird
ahead.
aspect of they are in the seed core, but
Mhm.
they inhabit a body, and they can also do stuff to inhabit another body while their body is getting a shrine built around it. Um, and
But they're
then
only physically in one body at a time, with the exception of Bob that we know of.
yeah,
And Bob's problem was then he was like
when one
subjective
died and they're
time.
trying to combine back together.
Right. Right. Um,
Yeah, and
Yeah,
this is where I want the master to, because like in Divine Dungeon, he wanted to teach. He goes through and he starts explaining.
that could be another thing for Bob, the master with like his soul law that we don't know a lot about and his projects in the background. Hmm. Hmm. Anyway, carry on.
Sorry, we got more here. Dennis Vanderkerken says the short of it
Oh,
is,
we did that one.
oh, just kidding. Very correct. Mental burnout is intense problem by the end of book 11. Got to rotate that
Ration
time
that time.
or ration. And
Yeah,
so,
which could explain also that long period nap, where maybe then Cal kind of finish finish or fixing everything, right? Because they said there was a couple 100 years of hibernation.
yeah,
So
yeah, I'm
much.
still just trying to figure out because our spider chosen was a core and is now inhabiting a body. The wisps are out and about running around with Grace, and broken items are being created when half or a portion of Kale isn't or is sleeping, so it's like his subconscious is doing stuff.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's a lot of so many.
There's so much there. There's so
Yep.
much there. Couple of things that I miss, though I enjoy the point of view in the Artorian Archives series, is we don't get to see like Kale and Cal's perspective. We do get the conversations with Artorian, who's like his right hand man here, which is a lot of fun, and get to see the development there. Um, yeah, rereadability. This is one of those books that it's just the series does such a great job with the world building and seeing how everything is interconnected. So much fun.
I
Yeah.
I can't wait until Arturian's chosen spider lady, which you said earlier, Zilia,
Zelia.
until Zilia gets to the point, and I guess you also mentioned it, where they go into the Tower of Ascension and they can communicate with things, as well as like we get to meet Woe of the Wise, who is the star or celestial or bodies, sun star bodies, and how S rankers can go into a different plane like Dawn does. So, yeah, like there's just a lot of potential there. Yeah, and then with the Wisps, they're also Divine Dungeon 5 when we meet the Infernal or no, sorry, when we meet Dungeon Eternium, and he's essentially using the Wisp or aura to attract things, and now we have a bunch of Wisps running around all the chaos and havoc they can get into. For this one, Grace is, essentially still going through training with um Danny, but we do not get to see, her influencing or aspects on the world. Ba, ba, ba. Then it
Well,
says AA6 will sort the broken item question, also more fights. Excuse me. Though the bigger fights are in 7, a significantly bigger one in 8, and like the last whole third of 9 is a boss fight. Okay,
you know how to
that
get Peter's attention there,
I was
Dennis.
gonna say, so I knew going into 5 it was supposed to be developmental because we have no idea what we're doing. These are all new parameters that we're able to operate within, and yeah, consequences. So I'm excited to see more and bigger fight scenes.
Yeah, always looking forward to more fight scenes, especially as we unlock more epic stuff. I want to double back on the Wisp thing real quick,
Okay.
unless you want to finish your thought there.
Or go ahead.
Okay, so you've read The Divine Dungeon more recently than I have, so correct me if I get my lore wrong. But we learn about other dungeons through Danny, where eventually they produce more wisps than then send out into the world to help these other dungeons and everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, we learn what happens when a wisp is created. And, we try to keep this channel PG-13, but long story short is, when a daddy dungeon and a mommy dungeon or wisp love each other, they make more wisps. And we see Grace in this book. But you were talking about all these other dungeons and how Grace is going through training. Like, what if, like, in the background, Cal could be pretty much be setting up a wisp daycare to get ready to go and guide all these other dungeons,
Uh, so yes, the
expand that network node a little bit
end
more.
of, or well, no, maybe it's not. I think it's the end of 4 when we actually meet Acme as Dale and we get the prophecy of
Hmm.
the moon creating the ice age and Cal killing the world by absorbing all the essence. But afterwards, and I wish I had it pulled, it talks about Cal creating essentially the golden era or the perfect life. And that's where I know it's going to be quite a ways down the road, but I'm excited to see, how it all comes together.
We get a handful of books for that, so it should be a lot of fun. A
Yep.
lot of fun. Um, Definitely after we get through a couple more books, would love to go back through the other series to just do like a full wrap up and talk about the Completionist Chronicles at that point. Um, and like the Divine Dungeon series. I think we could just have a lot of fun connecting the dots and the lore. Um, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Final thoughts. This has been a blast. We could talk about these series all
Oh,
day.
sorry, other random thought I had before I forget. So the broken items, 6 talks about them, but we get to see a little bit of it here where Zilia is finally putting Arturian to nose to the grindstone kind of deal, and he's going through and reading all of the different, code for how the items work and whatnot. And yeah, I want to see more of that. And yeah, it's just on a different aspect because it's like already been created kind of deal. So I, yeah,
Yeah. So did we read that one fully? Dennis Vanderkerken said
or
a
that was
seat.
read before you got back, but
Oh,
I
okay.
was just talking about the broken items
All
was
good. So Dennis Vanderkerken, so what do y'all want to see about the Wisps? Didn't fully follow how more are made. I can get you Wisp Genesis intel in the books.
so
That would
how
be fun.
wisps are made.
We see a bit of it in the Divine
I'm
Dungeon,
it's in the Divine Dungeon.
but we just
I
know
want to
about
say
Grace with
it
Cal.
is after Dungeon Madness, which might be book 4, because I'm drawing a blank, but essentially when Dakota drops the bomb that Luke, I am your father, I'm your daddy, just kidding, I'm your grandpa. And Dale utilizes a core that has mana in it before he's able to,
Mm,
striking the portal, which is infernal, with celestial, creating a chaos portal, which transports them through time. And Then Cal connects to the portal to keep it stable as well, realizes that Dale is Cal, and he he frees Danny by using his gauntlet because his meridians are shot, using his gauntlet to crush the Infernal Core dungeon that they were using, breaking Danny free. Danny goes back to Cal. We get the I love you, oh, I love you too. And with all the
Pop.
love and the silverwood tree pollen, which is how the elves reproduce, combined, the strong emotions of Wisp being a lure, uh, smart rocks, silverwood tree pollen combination turns
Does
into, did that just happen? And then Grace came about.
does that mean that as Artorian ascends, like he'll pretty much become like the great granddaddy for all the wisps because you need his law to create them?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing we're missing is more
And the
information
tree
about the
helped him with the
silverwood tree,
ascension. Yeah, that's true. That's
because
true.
they're all essentially attached to the tree because their seed cores are in there, which I assume is
Mhm.
how all the actual cores are being displaced and brought into the world as random different things. Um, but yeah, if you're looking for information on the Wisp, Divine Dungeon series, when Cal gets Danny back,
Okay.
yeah, that's
I
that's
I
how they're
would
made. But then the other Wisp information is at the port towards the end of 5 when we meet Dungeon Eternium, and essentially Wisp is, the law of attraction, or it's yeah, yeah.
we only get to meet a couple of them though. Like the bag wisp, that Danny's
Or
brother,
Backpack Dungeon. Or
backpack
that's
dungeon,
that's
sorry.
a core, that's not a Wisp. He doesn't have a Wisp.
Oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the one who hangs out with Oni, the ogre backpack dungeon guy. I can't think of his name.
It's all good. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't fully follow more. I can get Wisp Genesis intel in the book. I don't think there's, because okay, and another, sorry, causal connection for the Wisp idea is Dale is supposed to get a cultivation technique from the Moon Elves. He loses it to the Gauntlet, blames Cal for wanting to steal his stuff. Cal gets the imprint or the memory stone broken in his influence, allowing him to get the cultivation pattern. The cultivation pattern is essentially a wisp. He expands on it, he makes it better. Um, yeah, also they are great at like channeling magic, so that's where the assimilators come from, and the
Mm-hmm.
assimilators are wisp and jellyfish combined.
So many fun
Moo,
teasers.
backpack
Moo.
dungeon.
Yeah, Dennis again, spot on with the clarification and keeping us on point with the facts. Moo Backpack Dungeon will get mentioned again. It's good news. We could always use some good news. And yeah, Moo, I know that I believe it was Dennis was helping us out with our dwark, letting us know that we do learn more about him. Um, Question from Dennis: what is some information that you would want to see in upcoming books? Granted, a lot of it might be covered, but if it's new, I have room in book 12. Ooh,
So
hoo,
I
hoo,
think
hoo,
you
hoo.
already snuck in there that we would get information on Evan, our dork, for 11. So I was excited about
Right.
that. Um, hmm.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing. Gosh, now I want to rush through the next couple books. That way, I can know what kind of questions to ask as we learn more.
Yeah, yeah.
We
I
do
think
miss
my
some of
biggest
our.
thing, that's not it. That's a tricky one. Yeah, Kara was the biggest help last time with the names.
Yeah.
What would I like to see more emphasized or gone through? So, in the Divine Dungeon series, we have the High Elves, which we meet. They're snooty and they realize they effed up because we met the Dark Elves first, and the Dark Elves have now the monopoly on the Silverwood tree. Through Artorian Archive, we get more iteration or expansion on the Wood Elves, who are essentially what we're doing here, where they have their core tree, but then they also project their body out, but then they're also an amalgamation of all of their entities being put into one body. But if you smoke this hookah, this cultivator hookah, you can slow down your cultivation enough to separate your personas. So that was very interesting.
I
Throughout
really
Completionist Chronicles, we get kind of like one iteration of Elf, which we now know through our Arturian archives. We have the Dark Elves on the moon, and the other ones are getting cycled through. We get to see some of Oak and Birch, I believe, with Madame Chandra, and we get to see a couple of the elves take, I believe it is King Henry out, when Arturian pops up. So we get to see that. I'm curious. Completionist Chronicles, Joe using the chalk to create the Predator's territory around the guild barracks. Later, we find out those are the Neanderthals. I'm curious to see what, the who, the how those are. My impression is it is the Dark Elves because they are high enough in their cultivation to alter their bodies, and they are currently the only people who are considered passive and didn't want to participate
that we've
in
met so far.
that we've met so far. So,
We get to see some little threads there a bit in this book because Cal had people wake up in animals that weren't like initially animals, right? So he starts working on those pieces. So the Neanderthals, there could be just like so much there.
yeah.
Not to mention all the other
I
quote
but
unquote hidden races
the
behind the
fact that they're
scenes.
like spies and that's like pretty much what she does. So I assume
That's a good
it's
point.
either, you know, an amalgamation of like Chandra because she does the body
Mm,
manipulation, but Marie, I believe, is as high. And then we've got, I want to see more of the master, which isn't the master, Tatum, because he's soul and S rank is soul, which can't be altered after you're in the spiritual rank. But wait, you're not because Cal's not. And yeah, so I don't know if that helped.
yeah. We appreciate it, Dennis. I have noted down the Neanderthal request. Note, not the elves. What else?
Hmm. Or
Man, we're getting
also,
spoiled here.
Evan's story, the Dwarf secret revealed in the cover of 11. Mind you, AA8 was last release. Okay, so yeah, it's explained, but it's not public yet. Hmm.
Also, Dennis says, can confirm that Tatum comes up almost every book with some tidbit or another of Artorian archives, which is great because love seeing his character development. And also just I'm looking forward to seeing the progression into soul space world into the game world and just like how that all works with the kind of like the deities, right? Because clearly Tatum isn't there when they interact in Completionist Chronicles, and now we kind of get some hints at least of now he's hanging out in hell with all these skeleton animals of every species wandering around in crazy gravity.
I think that might be covered in the next book when he talks about burnout is real and it gets addressed somewhat there, where
Hmm.
my assumption is still in the Silverwood tree, which has the connection to Dungeon Eternium, which is how he can interact, not interact, project into, um, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Mm,
Dennis says, from this point on, when Tatum shows up, put on your Academy thinking hat because he gets nitty gritty about some of the system, cultivation, soul space complexities, which
mm.
makes a lot of sense. He always wanted to be a teacher, right? And he's currently playing with a lot of projects. I guess he helped a lot initially, but after those first couple hundred failures, he much rather yeah.
Oh, I guess that's true. I thought that was more in the fact that, like, at the end of Divine Dungeon, he's pretty much like, yeah, I've saved the world, or I've tried to give people a place and save the world 5 times, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, which makes sense. Like we see some of that exhaustion on Dawn, right? In was it like book 2 of Artorian Archives, just like all the countless wars she's seen and the toll it's taken on her soul.
And then we
Um,
get a little bit more expanded on that in this book, where she's like, yeah, Ember had 3 parts, but 2 of them matter, the beginning and the end. The middle is, you know, an amalgamation, which is the
oh,
opposite of how I try to normally go, which
eh,
is journey before destination. But I can
I see what you did
understand.
there. Yeah,
Um,
I see what you did there.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's hard not just to binge this series.
Yeah, because I assume between potentially getting to the beginning of the Completionist Chronicles and where we're currently at, they expand on how many locations are going to be. We
Right, because
know we
we
have the
got an extra.
humans and the wolfmen, which is the
Mhm.
first one, which is also considered the R of ritual. And then
Mhm.
we know each iteration is supposed to be an elevation or the next
Right, we
jump.
see them progress
So
through that.
I can't spell. However you spell ritual.
So, end of 12 is more plot goodness, which Dennis is currently working on. So that's still before our Completionist Chronicle beta run. So we get to see the alpha development and more character plot goodness development. Um, yeah, I wonder if that means we'll get to see a larger range of the cast too, like more time with like.
So didn't they pop up at the end of this one where we got to see Hans and Tom?
Yeah, we get a little bit of a snapshot with Zelia, his dreamer, or Artorian's chosen, because she talks about like describes some of the people that stopped by to check up on her. So you kind of get some hints that more and more of these people are out in the world, kind of doing their own thing,
Well, because we
earning their
had
spots in the game.
the oops, I may have messed up, decanted a bunch of people. Now that's why all of our leaders have a bigger headache with more people who remember all their grudges, die, blah blah blah. Um, and then we also have like Arturians waiting to decant his people because he wants to have a place for them to go and get everything under order and underway. And they
Yeah,
have a
why
direct
let them suffer? Come on in when Grandpa's ready to
a
set you all up and enjoy them. Hopefully, he's
but
not.
I believe it falls directly into Kale needing someone to essentially smack them around and be like, hey, some days you have to be the beggar. You can't make assumptions about people or judge a book by its cover without getting in there, and the experiences you'll have may outweigh the potential loss. So when Sonny's driving the Dragon, and you get to see Ember pretty much be like, hey, take some time for yourself. You need to take care of you too, and being there. And then when we get to see the other Dawn, the dwarven guy, when he first comes back after getting his butt kicked by Dawn, yeah, where he's like, what are you doing this for?
Right. Cal and Dale are so good for each other. And I think, Cal and Artorian are so good for each other because Artorian still kind of helps him keep his humanity with that like beggar scene. And we get to see that Cal is also kind of out there wandering, right? So it kind of makes you wonder, as more and more people are decanted and put into the world, how many of the gods and or the systems are out there walking amongst you, right? Going and
Yeah, and
like
their
traveling to
layer of
taverns and
influence, and
mhm, mhm.
so random. Yep.
So Dennis says binging Divine Dungeon, Artorian Archives, and Completionist Chronicles comes very recommended due to the frankly maddening amount of interlinking references, callouts, and tributes. People have made whole Excel sheets.
I need to
You
take some
almost have
time to
to.
dive deeper into the
Yeah.
Excel sheets. We've had a couple given to us or linked to us that I just need to go through.
Hmm.
But that point right there is probably why I enjoy this as much as I do, just because in video game logic, I really enjoy Easter eggs or those little things that they put in and they incorporate from another series they
Hmm.
did, or so on and so forth. And
The
that's,
tributes.
yeah, where
And what's so fun about it too for Peter and myself is we're absolutely atrocious with pop culture references. When other,
oh
mainstream
yeah.
books try to do it, and it's like, what, what? And then here we're
I,
like, oh yeah, I see you, Danny. I see
but
you, Cal.
that's the beauty of so random side note, there was a comment on one of our other reviews that we did for Scythe, and apparently
Mhm.
my pronunciation of something was completely wrong, and they didn't care for it, and they were like, "What? You don't even know where that came from?" And I was like, "Nope, no reference, didn't know where it came from. I
Still enjoy
thoroughly
the book
enjoyed the
though.
book and the series,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
things happen, and it's just
Be
like."
inclusive. I
Yeah,
mean, character
it's
names.
but there's also, for example, regicide was just a funky word,
I
and I
remember
ended
that,
up
and you
looking
went
it
and looked it
up,
up.
and it's
Yeah.
like the killing of a king, of which, is a
I thought it
thing.
was a silence mage.
Or the guy's name was Reggie, who committed regicide, which is the killing of a king that he did. Um,
The layers on that pun.
yeah.
So,
The Raven, I swear Dennis has a way to mess with the flow of time in order to crank out books at light speed. I
thank you. Thank
cannot
you, Dennis.
disclose this information at this time, but if you follow all the references inside of the book, he may or may not have figured out how to tap into the time.
Right. Dennis responded, I'm actually currently on a small writing break myself in order to connect new strings to all the pages taped on my walls. So I get all the history and timeline events correct in the next few books.
Mm.
We can appreciate that and the dedication to making sure everything lines up. Um, and I have to say, for the series so far, everything that I've picked up so far just like fits perfectly together and is seamless and just so much fun learning more and more about the world and how everything is interconnected. Um, Dennis says, last cue for me. I've made y'all go for 2 hours again. We could talk about this stuff all day. We appreciate everyone hanging out with us live. Did y'all figure out why AA5 is called Acme title?
So first thought was Acme is the law Cal is attached to, which is it's kind of the inception, because Acme is the law of everything. And when we have the conversation with Cal going up the tower and how Acme is essentially the embodiment of everything, and that he doesn't have someone, so he's not actively in the world. And then the irony of being in the world destroys the world, so he has to build a world. But the inclusion or the
Inception
understanding
there.
of all, which brings us to Kale's theory of how he has to allow it to grow and build, which by it destroying itself or succeeding and evolving is the only way that he's going to be able to make the best of it, is iterations and completing and going through it. So that was my vibe I got.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to have to piggyback off that. The fact that the law of Acme is what saves us all, right? Going into the soul space. So kind of like the age of Acme. Yeah. So many Easter eggs. We're next read through, we're going to have to post that spreadsheet, maybe share it on our Discord. Shameless plug, the Mountaindale Press Discord is a lot of fun. We know that we've seen Dennis, aka, I don't want to butcher it, Terror
I think,
Floof.
yeah, I was gonna say I knew the floof.
Yep, I was going to say the Floof, but yeah. Yeah. So, Dennis, thanks, Carl. Mighty kind. Timeline wise, I'm accounting for all related books in the DDEU. So, Divine Dungeon, Extended Universe, LL, WWCC, etc. But more importantly, getting actual history in the correct order. Oh, Roman, Egyptian, etc. That
That
okay.
is another thing I need to do more about, because there are a lot of uh, old cultural wise tales or whatever. I can't even think of the words right now that
Yeah.
come full circle. Example, Naruto, the nine-tailed fox is actually a legend in Asian culture, is a thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, as
Everything
well.
influences everything else. And then you have the Divine Dungeon universe where the noodle monster is just such a drag to work on. It kept dragging on, so we call it a drag on.
What history master?
Dennis says, I'm not a history master. Lots of
Oh,
reading.
not okay.
When doing the merger into CC1, I got to make sure I get the references right. Exiting back into the real world from AA has some nuance. Yeah, the real world. We're not experts on the real world either when it comes to
So,
history.
so
Google's our friend.
that is, or sorry, those monsters mentioned in the start of CC1 in Joe's real world come from somewhere, and I'm tackling all of that now. So, random causal connection directly related to that. The end of Divine Dungeon, Book 5, Dungeon Eternium, is using the Wisp aura, which is the luring effect, as well as monsters naturally gravitate towards sources of essence. And that was my understanding, is Cal, even if he has the chains of chaos, he's still able to cultivate and think, which is why we're in his soul space. So monsters of the deep and other things are drawn to him because, much like Sunny in Altorian Archive, when he cultivates, he can't absorb it all. Not to say that Cal couldn't, but if Cal is not at the level of absorbing that level of essence, so to speak, uh, there are other S rankers out in the world, as well as Dungeon Eternium was a triple S dungeon. So even though he could absorb, infernal, celestial, all 6 types, if it was of a higher grade that he couldn't absorb and or became contaminated due to interplaying essences that the monsters like to absorb, then it doesn't meet his law of Acme, as when Cal first ascends and he's surrounded by essence but is dying because he can't absorb it because it's not the purest form, is what I would think. But then when he's found by not Elon Musk, and taken away, they're like, where did our good, aura go? Yeah, and then they go out and Cal sets off to save the world again by absorbing all the humans. Just kidding. Yeah, that
Do you
that would be my
think
thought.
Elon Musk got a good amount of Cal tokens for the prestige shop when he came in? Like
I
he hooks them
Yeah,
up.
he's probably set up similar to Dawn, how Cal has a full memory of Dawn and she can have whatever she wants. As well as when he connects to the computer and everything else that happens, potentially releasing it. And that's one that I've debated as well. My understanding, Completionist Chronicles 1, when Cal gets connected to the computer, is when the chains of chaos break. Because he goes, finally, because he's now influencing the outer world, talking to Elon. Yeah.
Yeah. We could go really down that rabbit hole, and one of our many projects is we would love to go and do some deeper dives on some of this stuff now that we're seeing all the causal connections.
I was gonna say
Um,
these are like, I have a good
Probably our,
idea of what they said, but if you asked me to show you, I would be like, it's hidden.
not to
I
mention our great way with names.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, a lot of fun. It's one of my most gifted series out there is the Divine Dungeon. It's like, hey, you enjoy video games? Like, welcome to this amazing world. Let's get you hooked. Um, yeah,
Oh, you got it. Yeah.
yep.
Expectations of book 6 before you delve into it. Expectations would be we get to see some more of the main cast, because towards the end of 5, um,
With
Arturian was
Celia.
kind of kicking Dale, being like, you got to beat the beggar, you got to interact, and, simple things like putting his hand on his shoulder and actually getting sleep really helped him. And he's been doing a lot more interacting with the people in the world. But we literally opened all of Han's affinity channels and potentially Rose's. We didn't say it, but we're pretty sure it happened. As well as Kale needs some organization. And the one thing that I kind of miss from the Arturian archives is more so of the comic relief. Example, in Divine Dungeon, we get the Hans takes Dale to the pleasure house where they do it together with a grandma. And, like, Hans is a comic relief throughout Arturian archives or
We
the
get
Divine
a
Dungeon.
good amount of chuckles through it, but not the same level of puns.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one of the things that is done really well about these series is they still very much feel like the same series, the same books, but kind of have like different slight takes on it. You know what I mean? You still get the overlap, but then like get to follow our yeah. Sorry. Chat is hopping. We appreciate you guys. Bolt Tech. What in the world did I tune into? Talking about grandmas. It's
So,
true. It's
yeah,
true.
essentially, Mountaindale Press is amazing, and they have several books. There's series, Inception level series that, yeah, I would recommend the publication order. So it's like Divine Dungeon series, and it bleeds a little bit into Completionist Chronicle series, and then goes backwards in time to Artorian Archive series, while doing more in Completionist Chronicles series. And then wait, there's more because we started the Lion's Lineage arc as well.
Have you started listening to that yet?
I've listened to it once
Oh,
and I wasn't amazed, but it was book one for developmental and world building for our cast. It,
it's pretty
there's a
common though.
lot of
Like
potential
you got to lay down the
and
groundwork.
yeah, lot of potential. My understanding is it is essentially Henry's father who it is, but yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, thank you. Tara,
yeah. The Wolfman
and
Warlock,
Wolfman Warlock,
Bill
which I don't know how I
Leomancer.
forgot.
I'm looking forward to book 2 of that series.
Yeah.
But kind of same thing. Like you gotta get the build up because it where we're coming into the series, we've been playing in the space so long, but it's important for them to make it newbie friendly, right? If they pick up book 1 of anywhere in the series, it's its own set piece,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you have
yeah.
to go through the building all over again.
Yeah, each series can be a standalone, but by far my favorite thing of these authors and or Mountaindale Press as a whole is the
Hmm.
causal connections and Easter eggs.
Hmm. So Dennis, oh, so you want more Dale, Hans, Tom, Rose? Question mark. Ah, okay.
Yes, only
I want to see the
because
original
I
crew again.
enjoy the dynamic. As of currently, I'm a little hurt about Tom. I know he did finally get his memories back. He is a higher cultivation. He is a Northman. He is accepted back to the people, but the people are divided. The people are the people, and there a lot of them are the Wolfmen. And we've kind of lost the Tom that we knew and loved, where he had that whole
Yeah.
epic intro just for Tom. But yeah, I think it
You
would
got like
help ground
40 years
Kale.
of memory. Yeah. And just like I want to see the steps along the path to when we get to the completionist chronicles, right? Because we get to meet him again. But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
what
inside.
about
Yeah,
hmm
yeah, how he got there, as well as, I said it before, I didn't get as that's probably another thing this book was missing for me. We didn't get influences that possibly could have been turned into a song, such as Killer of Her Loneliness or
uh
Sunny or what is it? Oh,
we got some stories though, some legends
yeah.
of our dreamers walk in the world, our deities. Dennis says, I'll show you what those kids look like all grown up. Any other characters you want to see get some screen time? If they already have incoming books, I could pretend you told me.
Hmm.
Good looking
I
out, Dennis. Good looking out. It's always fun seeing old friends again, especially in
do we get
books
to
that
see the portal mage? I don't believe, or
do we
so.
really want to see our portal mage?
One separate side note, in Divine Dungeon, we got the crafting tables or alchemy stuff that we could go to a special room, safe place, and that didn't really
Mm-hmm.
get fleshed out where they could make stuff and then Cal would absorb it and then they would get things for it. I figured more of that would have been fleshed out in earlier AA, but it makes sense because you couldn't add stuff that's not there. Um, I I feel like you're probably gonna emphasize it or do something with it, but our Spider Queen, who is our chosen, who is the embodiment of teleportation magic, and I forget the name of our portal mage because it's not Chandra. She's the
Oh,
oh
you mean the lady, not the junior officer.
well, yeah, we he was our love to hate character,
Yeah,
which I
yeah,
don't care
yeah.
about him, but I want to
I know
see
who
the
you're
portal
talking about
mage
now.
because I don't know if she made a pact. And then I want to see Barry the Devourer because he made a pact. He's obviously here, but he's not. And then I want to see Xenocide, who was planning on either ascending to the heavenly, but before that absorbs into Dungeon Eternium's
Uh,
triple S rank dungeon core. So yeah,
okay, there we go. Dennis says in AA11, I do decant some of the older cast. Amber, thank you. Portal
yes.
Mage, Father Richard, few
Wait,
more. Also in AA11, Tom has an entire dedicated chapter to him. He gets a big moment. Yeah, we hear Tom gets a shout out in this book. It'd be interesting to see how Artorian and Father Richard get along with his history with the church.
I think pretty well because Arturian takes out a lot of the demons and learns something new. Father Richard is essentially, the head of the Let's Slay Demons. So I think
Hmm.
it'd be all right. As well as I don't think Father Richard was as in because he was kind of banished to, hey, go off to some mountain and do stuff. Was never high in the clergy or whatnot.
Hmm.
So I think they'll hit it
He
off
was our,
pretty well,
oh,
as
well,
well
I guess that's
as
true. He is our demon
Father.
slayer, right?
Yeah, Father Richard also was the nicest, highest rank person to meet Dale.
This is
Like
true.
he was nice from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Side note, Baltic says just like Book One, Stormlight, the build up takes a few hundred pages, but it's getting there non-stopping or not
Hmm.
stopping. Speaking of which, book two episodes when? Book two. Didn't we do book two? I thought we were current with
Stormlight.
Stormlight.
Yeah, he's probably asking which one it is. What I want to know, Boltac, is when are we going to continue the Obsidian trilogy? Because I could do some uh, traditional fantasy, get Peter out of the lit RPG realm for a little bit, as much as I am having fun
This
binging
is
this
true.
series.
What was the other one? It's not Legolas or it's not Lord of the Rings Sword of the King, but it's a different name. Oh, Aragon?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, Aragon series.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
Aragon? Okay, yeah, that thing.
with an E. Yeah, that's a series that I would love to go back and finish. Then it says writing Artorian and Richard and 11 was an adventure all by itself. Their initial meeting is the bomb. It was so good to write. I think it has the majority of the chapter. That's going to be a fun
Mm.
meetup. That's what I was going.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
there we
Yeah.
go. Yes, I am down, Baltec. You let me know
Uh,
your schedule. We're always looking for book recommendations, guys. Feel free to drop them in the comments below. Hit us up on Discord and welcome friends to hang out with us in chat and live on these streams every
yeah, I was gonna
Sunday.
say. People can join as a webcam, a disembodied voice,
Some just space
but
optics in the background.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. But yeah, could talk books with you guys all day. Thanks for hanging out with us in this little corner of the internet. Um, if you guys have been watching this stream prior to reading the Divine Dungeon, you just caught it on a whim, go check out the series. We typically recommend going in publication order, but you could jump in at any point depending on where you feel. Go ahead, Pete.
Shameless plug. If you do not own Audible, it's okay. We cannot be friends. But
Uh,
if you want to own Audible, we have an affiliate link in the description. I believe the parameters are you get the first month free, supports the channel. Thank you. If you have a friend
support
who
our
does not
audiobook
have
addiction.
Audible, you can also recommend it. And then this book in particular is in the description, trying to get better at linking, recommending, and I've
It's
just kind of
also
fallen off the
included on
bandwagon.
Kindle Unlimited if you're not an ear reader.
Yeah.
So you could pick that up as well. Yeah, read more books, even though it is a geeky lit RPG, whatever you want to talk about, like just so many awesome life lessons from our pillow mage of sunshine and love. Um, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Could keep ranting and raving. What uh what we got coming up next week, Pete?
So I believe it's this button. Aha. Next week we have Lux, which is book 4, not really, but really in the oh, I almost said Rexus. Help me out here.
I'm sorry. Reckoners.
It's by Brandon
The
Sanderson.
Reckoners.
Reckoner, sorry, book 4 in the Reckoner series, but it is not really because it doesn't follow our main cast. It's the Texas Reckoner novel. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Good different take on the universe, and haven't quite decided what we're going to follow up with. Let us know if you have any requests for October, but we've been trying to be a bit more festive. So I think there's a
Uh,
couple books,
yeah, that we wanted to
maybe do a
squeeze
zombie
in.
month. Um, I
Yeah,
think
I
a couple
don't
of them are
have
some other
them.
Mountaindale press titles, but we'll let you guys know more details next week, as well as just watch our social media and Discord. As soon as we create the links, it pops up in there, so you can kind of look ahead under our Geek Out channel. Um, yeah.
And then I
So
guess real quick, did y'all weep or cry at any or at all
at
in
all,
AA5? I mm, no, there
it
weren't
was an
really any
emotional.
like the closest I came was the pink eyes that okay. There were a couple like close moments and I can't remember what I'm thinking of or referencing where there's like a tear that sheds but then somehow they get their composure together and they suck it back up. But the third chosen that
Mhm.
Arturian picks up holding the child was a close one. Dawn
It pulled at
when
my
she
heartstrings.
yeah, she has her dreamer or dream that is connected to her soul and can spend her um magic in Bob's shop, and then Arturian when he has the eyes that he can visit in his Silverwood communal space or yeah, Silverwood Tree communal space that is essentially going to make him come to terms with all of his love, and realizing the other half of it was a close one.
Yeah.
Only time
There's
I've ever seen Peter cry is when he spilled a monster. This is true. It is typically instantly one of two things: shed a tear, because it's kind of like, oh, not.
Misty
I guess
Deck
it doesn't
Go-Go
really fit
Juice.
here. I was gonna say we did actually get a smashing a beer mug moment, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when Dale pours out some for the fallen.
Mm,
But spilling a monster is not like that, because, it's like losing a loved one,
uh,
but not really. That was a
I
joke.
I enjoy the Artorian Archive series because it is a very diverse emotional roller coaster ride. And I feel like a good part of that Dennis does so well is like with their cultivation, Artorians is about love, right? So it's not just easy. A lot of times, like it's difficult for him. He has this habit, as they say in the book, of turning enemies into allies and befriending people. But it's work, and we see him put in the work. Um,
Uh, This feels like a turning point in a lot of ways. The only other time we came close to kind of this vibe was back when, oh, we're in the fringe and we've got the bandits, and he ends up getting rid of some of his corruption by sending it through the other cultivator, but he also lets the one bandit go because he was, innocent and kind of put into it against his will, versus the person who is ever going to be, what he is. But yeah, now seeing the reflection, and not all love is sunshine and rainbows.
Very true. Very, very true.
Oh man, and I guess the top quote, I wish I had it, is the one where it's right after Arturian uses the coin space for the first time and gets the mountain tokens, and then Kale freaks out and he's talking to Kale and he's like, what is a problem, or what is somebody else's problem? Nothing. It doesn't matter, because it's just a problem.
Hmm.
But what you can do is, if you solve their problem, did you help the person whose problem it was? And of course, I absolutely butchered it, and I will be pulling it and referencing it later. But yeah, that was my favorite
There's a
botched
lot of
quote.
good ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of good ones. Um, yeah, we've said it before. We'll say it again. Both Peter and I are busy bees. Adulting, taking care of the family, doing all that throughout the week in the real world. But we really look forward to these streams where we get to hop online, hang out with some of our other book friends in this epic corner of the internet. So we really appreciate all of you who take time to join us live, and like still really appreciate everybody that catches us on the rewatch. Um, just can't get enough of geeking out over these epic stories like Artorian Archive by Dennis Vanderkerken. Again, thanks for hanging out, answering our questions, teasing us a little bit about all the epic goodness coming up. And yeah, you know,
Or
just
Dennis said, I appreciate y'all. And I would have to say, I really appreciate you too, Dennis Vanderkerken, because it's one of those surreal moments where oftentimes you have, I guess, famous people or idols, and they feel larger than life. But throughout interacting with you, Dennis, it brings home the whole we're all human, and you've been very interactive, and yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah. We're
Yeah.
all human.
Yeah. Been a blast getting to know you. Everybody go hit up Terror Floof on the Mountaindale Press server. Super awesome guy. And yeah, we'll let you guys know when the next couple Mountaindale Press books come up in our rotation. We're rapidly approaching 100 Geek Outs. And yeah, thanks for making the journey thus far. So much fun. Am I missing anything, Pete?
Hope to geek out with you here soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.